My name is Victoria Chen, and the day my husband left me for his pregnant mistress, I smiled, signed the papers, and wished them well. Everyone thought I'd lost my mind. They were wrong. I was just getting started. Before I tell you exactly what was in that envelope I handed her at the baby shower, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love hearing from you, and trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this one. It started 6 months ago on a Tuesday morning. I was in the kitchen of our Westchester home, pouring coffee into matching mugs, the expensive Italian ones Marcus had insisted we buy because they made him feel successful. I was wearing my silk robe, hair still damp from the shower, planning the rest of my day. Meetings with the board, lunch with potential investors, an evening reviewing quarterly reports for the pharmaceutical company I'd built from the ground up over 15 years. Marcus walked in wearing his charcoal suit, the Tom Ford one I'd bought him for his 40th birthday last year. He looked good. He always looked good. 6'2", athletic build maintained by a personal trainer 3 times a week, salt and pepper hair that made him look distinguished rather than old. My husband of 12 years. He didn't sit down. He stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, and said 5 words that would change everything. Victoria, I want a divorce. I remember setting down the coffee pot very carefully, making sure it was centered on the marble countertop. I remember the morning sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the dust particles floating in the air. I remember thinking how strange it was that the world could keep turning when someone just detonated a bomb in the middle of your kitchen. I see, I said, because that's what you say when your brain hasn't caught up to what your ears just heard. I'm in love with someone else, Marcus continued, his voice steady rehearsed. Her name is Amber. She's 28. She's pregnant. We're having a baby in 4 months. 28. Pregnant. Baby. The words hit me like physical blows. How long? I asked, surprised at how calm my voice sounded. 1.5 years. 1.5 years. While I'd been working 60-hour weeks to expand our company, attending charity galas with him on my arm, planning our dream vacation to the Maldives, he'd been building a whole other life with a woman barely older than my nephew. I've already talked to a lawyer, Marcus said, pulling papers from his briefcase. I'm willing to be very generous in the settlement. I'll give you the house, the cars, half of our personal assets. All I want is my freedom and a clean break. No drama, no fighting. Just sign the papers, and we can both move on. I looked at the divorce papers. He was sliding across the kitchen island toward me. I looked at my husband, the man I'd supported through business school, the man I'd introduced to the investors who helped launch his career, the man who'd cried in my arms when his father died. And I saw a stranger. Who is she? I asked. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Does it matter? Humor me. He sighed. She works at the company. She's in marketing. We met at the corporate retreat last year. The corporate retreat. The one I'd organized. The one I'd paid for out of my budget. He'd met his mistress on my dime. And you're sure about this? I asked. You're sure you want to leave our marriage for a 28-year-old? I love her, Victoria. She makes me happy. She makes me feel alive in a way I haven't felt in years. There it was. The classic midlife crisis wrapped in the language of self-actualization. Poor Marcus, trapped in a marriage to a successful, financially independent woman who'd given him everything he had. How terrible for him. I picked up the pen he'd placed next to the papers. Victoria, he said, and I heard surprise in his voice. You're just going to sign them? Just like that? I met his eyes. What did you think I'd do, Marcus? Beg you to stay. Fight for a marriage you clearly don't value? I'm 41 years old. I'm the CEO of a company worth $300 million. I don't have time to convince a man to love me. I signed the papers with steady hands. Every page, every line. I didn't read them carefully. I didn't negotiate. I just signed. Marcus looked almost disappointed, like he'd been expecting a bigger reaction. Like my calm acceptance somehow diminished the drama of his grand gesture. I'll have my things out by the weekend, he said. Take your time, I replied. I'm going to be very busy anyway. And I was, but not with what he thought. The moment Marcus left for work, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to Margaret Chen, my aunt and the most ruthless divorce attorney in New York. The second was to David Kim, the private investigator I'd used for corporate espionage cases. The third was to my best friend Rachel, who arrived at my house within the hour with a bottle of very expensive whiskey and a willingness to help me burn the world down. "You signed them," Rachel said, staring at me in disbelief. "You actually signed them without reading them?" "I did." "Victoria, what are you doing?" I poured us both drinks. "I'm playing a different game than Marcus thinks I'm playing." Over the next 3 days, David Kim earned every penny I paid him. He discovered that Amber Hayes was indeed 28, worked in marketing, and was 5 months pregnant with Marcus's child. But that's not all he discovered. Amber had been hired 18 months ago, right after the corporate retreat where she'd allegedly first met Marcus. Except according to her employment file, her qualifications were mediocre at best. She'd been hired despite having less experience than 3 other candidates because Marcus had personally pushed for her. The corporate credit card statements showed expensive dinners at hotels, weekend trips to the Hamptons charged as business expenses, jewelry purchases disguised as client gifts. Marcus had been using company money, my company's money, to finance his affair. But the real treasure was in the emails David recovered from Marcus's personal account. Emails where Marcus discussed his exit strategy with Amber, how he'd convinced me to accept a quick, generous settlement, how once he was free, he'd marry her, legitimize their child, and they'd start their new life together. How she deserved to be a CEO's wife, to have the lifestyle she'd always dreamed of. There was one email in particular that made my blood run cold. "Once Victoria signs those papers and the divorce is final, I'll propose at the baby shower," Marcus had written. "Everyone important will be there. It'll be the perfect moment to announce our engagement and introduce you as the future Mrs. Chen. Victoria will be old news by then, and you'll be the woman on my arm at every event that matters. The baby shower, of course, the ultimate humiliation wrapped in a celebration." I sat in my home office, surrounded by evidence of my husband's betrayal, and I started planning. Aunt Margaret reviewed the divorce papers I'd signed with growing horror. "Victoria, these papers are a disaster for you," she said, her reading glasses perched on her nose. "You get the house and the cars, yes, but he structured it so you'd have no claim to his stock options, his bonus compensation, or any of the business assets he acquired during the marriage. You'd be giving up millions." "I know. Then why did you sign them?" "Because Marcus needed to feel like he'd won. He needed to feel safe." Margaret stared at me for a long moment, then a slow smile spread across her face. "What did you find?" I slid the folder across her desk. "Corporate fraud. Marcus used company funds to finance his affair. Hotel rooms, gifts, trips, all of it charged to the business and disguised as legitimate expenses. I have 18 months of documentation." Margaret's smile widened. "That's embezzlement." "Yes, it is. And if you report it to the board, Marcus gets fired, loses his stock options, faces possible criminal charges, and most importantly, loses his credibility. The generous settlement he offered me, it evaporates because he'll have nothing left to give." "But you signed the papers," Margaret pointed out. "Papers that were signed under false pretenses. Marcus represented his financial position fraudulently. He claimed assets he obtained through illegal means. The entire agreement is void." Margaret laughed, actually laughed. "You played him." "I played him. When are you going to drop the bomb?" I leaned back in my chair. "At the baby shower. When he proposes to her in front of everyone. When he thinks he's finally gotten everything he wanted. That's when I'll hand him the envelope." The next 8 weeks were the longest of my life. I had to watch Marcus pack up his things and move in with Amber. I had to listen to my friends express sympathy for poor abandoned Victoria. I had to endure the office rumors about Marcus's young girlfriend and their upcoming baby. But I didn't react. I stayed calm, professional, gracious. I even sent Amber a baby gift, a beautiful silver rattle from Tiffany's with a note that said, "Congratulations on your growing family." Amber actually sent me a thank you note. The audacity. Marcus, meanwhile, was thriving. He strutted around the office like a peacock, showing off photos of Amber's growing belly, talking about nursery designs and baby names. He told people we'd had an amicable divorce, that I'd been very understanding, that we parted as friends. At company events, he'd bring Amber on his arm. She'd wear designer dresses stretched over her pregnant belly and smile at everyone like she'd won the lottery. In a way, she had. She'd gotten the handsome older man, the executive title, the promise of a lavish lifestyle. What she didn't know was that I'd been quietly meeting with the board members. One by one, in private conversations, I'd been laying groundwork. "I'm concerned about some irregularities in the expense reports," I'd mentioned casually. "Have you noticed Marcus's travel schedule seems excessive for his role?" I'd ask innocently. I never accused him directly. I just planted seeds, asked questions, let them start connecting dots on their own. Rachel thought I was playing a dangerous game. "What if he finds out what you're planning?" she asked over dinner one night. "He won't. Marcus thinks he's already won. He thinks I'm too proud to fight back, too dignified to cause a scene. He's counting on my reputation as a professional, composed CEO to protect him. And you're going to use that against him?" "Exactly." The baby shower invitation arrived in my mailbox 6 weeks after Marcus moved out. Cream-colored cardstock, elegant script, Amber's carefully curated registry at luxury baby stores. "You are invited to celebrate the upcoming arrival of Baby Chen," the invitation read. "Join us as we welcome the newest member of our family." The location was the Mandarin Oriental, one of the most expensive hotels in the city. The guest list, which David had managed to obtain, included every important person in Marcus's professional and social circle. Executives from our company, his college friends, his family members, society women Amber wanted to impress. It was going to be the social event of the season. Amber's debut as Marcus's fiancée. Their announcement to the world that they were the new power couple. I RSVP'd yes and bought a very expensive gift, a designer diaper bag worth $3,000. "You're actually going?" Rachel asked incredulously. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." "Victoria, this is masochistic." "No," I corrected her. "This is strategic." The week before the baby shower, I had my final meeting with Aunt Margaret and David. We sat in Margaret's office, surrounded by boxes of evidence. "We have everything," David confirmed. 18 months of fraudulent expense reports, hotel receipts, credit card statements, emails planning the affair. And I found something else. He slid a document across the table. Amber's employment contract. Marcus signed off on a salary that's $20,000 above market rate for her position and experience level. He gave her 2 promotions in 18 months, both times over more qualified candidates. "Nepotism and corporate favoritism," Margaret noted. "That's a breach of his fiduciary duty to the company." "There's more," David continued. "I traced some of the hotel charges. Marcus billed romantic weekends as business trips. But the hotels he chose? They were in cities where the company had no clients, no business interests, nothing. He literally charged the company for his affair. I looked at the evidence spread before me. Months of betrayal, documented in black and white. "The board meeting is scheduled for the Monday after the baby's shower," I said. "That gives us perfect timing." Margaret nodded. "I've already drafted the complaint. The moment you're ready, we file with the board, report the embezzlement to the authorities, and void the divorce settlement based on fraud." "And Marcus?" "Marcus loses everything. His job, his stock options, his reputation, potentially his freedom if the DA decides to prosecute. And the settlement he thought he'd gotten? It becomes worthless because his assets will be frozen pending the investigation." I smiled. Not a happy smile. A cold, calculated smile that came from months of planning revenge. Perfect. The night before the baby's shower, I barely slept. I laid out my outfit, a stunning emerald silk dress that Marcus had always loved, designer heels, jewelry that cost more than most people's cars. If I was going to walk into the lion's den, I was going to look incredible doing it. Rachel came over early to help me get ready. "Last chance to back out," she said, zipping up my dress. "I'm not backing out. Victoria, what you're about to do, it's going to destroy him." "Good." She met my eyes in the mirror. "I know you're hurt. I know what he did was unforgivable. But are you sure this is what you want? Once you do this, there's no going back." I thought about Marcus signing those divorce papers, so confident in his victory. I thought about Amber sending me a thank you note for the baby gift, completely oblivious to the fact that she'd built her future on sand. I thought about the emails where they'd laughed about how understanding I was, how easy it had been to get me to sign away my rights. "I'm sure," I said, The Mandarin Oriental ballroom was decorated like something out of a fairy tale. White and gold everywhere, flowers cascading from ceiling installations, tables laden with expensive gifts. A banner hung across the back wall, "Welcome Baby Chen." Amber stood in the center of it all, glowing in a white designer maternity dress, her hand resting on her pregnant belly. Marcus was beside her, his arm around her waist, looking like the proud father-to-be. When I walked in, I saw several people notice me. Whispers rippled through the room. The ex-wife had shown up to the baby shower. How awkward. How uncomfortable. Poor Victoria. I walked straight up to Amber and Marcus with my head held high. "Congratulations," I said warmly, handing Amber a beautifully wrapped box. "I'm so happy for you both." Amber's eyes widened in surprise. "Victoria, I didn't think you'd come." "Of course I came. This is a celebration." I turned to Marcus. "You look well." He looked confused, suspicious, like he couldn't figure out my angle. "Thank you for coming. That's very gracious of you." "We're all adults," I said pleasantly. "What's past is past." I could see the relief flood his face. He'd been worried I might cause a scene, might embarrass him in front of all these important people. But here I was, the picture of dignity and class, blessing their union with my presence. Perfect. I made my way through the crowd, greeting people I knew, admiring the decorations, nibbling on hors d'oeuvres. I was charming. I was gracious. I was everything a sophisticated, mature woman should be when faced with her ex-husband's baby shower. And all the while, I kept my hand on the envelope in my purse. Halfway through the shower, Marcus clinked his glass to get everyone's attention. The room fell silent. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his arm around Amber. "Amber and I are so grateful to have your support as we prepare to welcome our son into the world." Their son. Of course it was a boy. The son I'd never been able to give him. "But that's not the only announcement we have today," Marcus continued, and I saw Amber's face light up with anticipation. "Amber, you've made me the happiest man in the world. You've given me a future I never thought I could have. And I want everyone here to know that I'm committed to that future." He got down on one knee. The crowd gasped. Amber put her hands over her mouth in theatrical surprise, even though they'd clearly planned this moment down to the second. Marcus pulled out a ring box. "Amber Hayes, will you marry me?" "Yes." Amber squealed. "Yes, yes, yes." The room erupted in applause. Marcus slipped the ring on her finger, stood up and kissed her. Everyone cheered. Phones came out to capture the moment. This was the Instagram-perfect proposal, the fairy tale ending to their love story. I waited until the applause died down. Then I stood up. "Marcus," I called out, "could I speak to you for just a moment? It's important." He looked annoyed at the interruption of his big moment, but he couldn't refuse without looking rude. "Of course." I walked over to him, very aware that everyone was watching. I reached into my purse and pulled out the envelope. "I wanted to give you this personally," I said, loud enough for people nearby to hear. "Consider it my engagement gift to you both." Marcus took the envelope, probably expecting a check or a congratulations card. He opened it with a smile on his face. I watched that smile die. Inside the envelope were 3 things. A letter from the board of directors scheduling an emergency meeting to discuss allegations of corporate fraud and embezzlement. A summary of the evidence David had compiled, showing 18 months of misappropriated company funds. And a notice from Aunt Margaret that the divorce settlement was being contested on grounds of fraudulent representation. Marcus's face went white. His hand started shaking. "What is this?" he whispered. "Read the letter," I said pleasantly. "It explains everything." He pulled out the board letter with trembling fingers. I watched his eyes scan the page, watched him realize what he was reading, watched the moment he understood that his entire world was about to collapse. "You can't," he stammered. "We had a deal. You signed the papers. Papers that were signed based on false information. You represented yourself as having legitimate assets, Marcus. But according to this evidence," I gestured to the envelope, "a significant portion of your compensation came from embezzled company funds. That makes our agreement void." Amber was looking between us, confused. "Marcus, what's going on?" "The board meeting is Monday morning," I continued, still in that pleasant, conversational tone. "They'll be reviewing 18 months of expense reports. The hotel rooms you charged to the company. The jewelry you bought with the corporate card. The weekend trips you disguised as business travel. All of it documented. All of it evidence of fraud. Marcus! Amber's voice was getting higher, panicked. Of course. You'll have a chance to defend yourself, I said. Maybe you can explain why the company paid for romantic dinners in cities where we have no clients. Maybe you can justify why your girlfriend got promotions over more qualified candidates. Maybe you can convince them it was all a misunderstanding. Marcus grabbed my arm. Victoria, please. We can talk about this. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back up at his face. Take your hand off me. He let go immediately. People around us were starting to notice something was wrong, starting to lean in to hear our conversation. You know what the funny thing is? I said, my voice still calm, still pleasant. If you'd just been honest, if you told me you wanted a divorce and negotiated fairly, I probably would have let you go. I would have been hurt, but I would have survived. We could have divided everything equitably, gone our separate ways, and both moved on with our lives. Victoria, I'm sorry, but you didn't do that. You tried to manipulate me. You used my pride against me, counted on me being too dignified to fight back. You thought you could take what you wanted and leave me with scraps. You thought I'd just accept it because I'm too professional, too composed, too concerned with my reputation to cause a scene. I stepped closer to him, close enough that only he could hear my next words. You forgot who built that company, Marcus. You forgot who made you. And now you're going to remember. I stepped back and raised my voice so the whole room could hear. Everyone, I'm so sorry to interrupt this beautiful celebration. But I think you should all know that Marcus won't be able to attend work on Monday. He'll be too busy explaining to the board why he embezzled over $200,000 from the company to finance his affair. The room went dead silent. Every eye was on us. Amber's face crumpled. What? Marcus, what is she talking about? The hotel rooms were company expenses, I continued. The jewelry he gave you? Company card. Those promotions you got? All approved by your boyfriend, who was violating his fiduciary duty to the shareholders. Congratulations on your engagement. I hope the ring fits, because it might be the last expensive gift you get for a while. Marcus tried to grab the envelope back, but I'd already given him copies. The originals were with Margaret and the board. You vindictive bitch, he hissed. Careful, Marcus, I said sweetly. You're surrounded by witnesses. I'd hate for you to add assault to your legal problems. I turned to Amber, who was crying now, mascara running down her face. Amber, honey, a word of advice. When a man leaves his wife for you, pay attention to how he leaves her. Because one day, that's how he'll leave you. Marcus didn't just cheat on me. He stole from the company to finance your relationship. He lied to you, to me, to everyone. And now you're having his baby, engaged to a man who's probably going to be arrested for embezzlement. I hope you got a good look at that mansion he promised you, because you'll never live there. I picked up my purse and headed for the door. Behind me, I could hear the chaos starting. People demanding explanations. Amber crying. Marcus trying to do damage control. I walked out of that ballroom with my head held high and I smiled. Rachel was waiting in her car outside. She'd been my getaway driver, ready to leave the moment I texted her. How did it go? She asked as I slid into the passenger seat. Perfectly. Did you really just destroy him at his own baby shower? His engagement celebration, actually. He proposed right before I gave him the envelope. Rachel started laughing, that wild, slightly hysterical laughter that comes from witnessing something absolutely insane. You're terrifying, she said. Thank you. We drove back to my house, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The weight I'd been carrying, the carefully maintained facade of calm dignity, all of it fell away. That night, my phone exploded with texts and calls. Marcus called 17 times. I didn't answer. Amber called from the hospital, claiming she was having stress-induced contractions. I blocked her number. Marcus's mother called to scream at me. I let it go to voicemail. The only call I answered was from Aunt Margaret. The board received the evidence package, she said. Emergency meeting is confirmed for Monday morning. I've also been in touch with the DA's office. They're very interested in the embezzlement charges. And the divorce settlement. I filed a motion to void it based on fraud. Given the evidence, I don't think you'll have any problem. Thank you, Margaret. Victoria, she said, and I heard the smile in her voice. I've been practicing law for 40 years, and I've seen a lot of revenge. But what you did today, that was art. Monday morning, I put on my best power suit and walked into the board meeting with my head held high. Marcus was there, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His lawyer was with him, a nervous young man who was clearly out of his depth. The board members had reviewed all the evidence. They asked Marcus to explain himself. He tried. He really did. He claimed the expenses were legitimate, that I was making false accusations out of spite, that this was a vindictive ex-wife trying to destroy him. But the evidence didn't lie. Hotel receipts from cities we didn't do business in. Credit card charges for jewelry that went to Amber. Expense reports that didn't match any legitimate business activity. The vote was unanimous. Marcus was terminated for cause, effective immediately. No severance. No stock options. No bonus. His employment contract was voided, and the company reserved the right to pursue legal action for the embezzled funds. Marcus sat there, stunned, as they stripped him of everything he'd built on my coattails. After the meeting, he tried to corner me in the parking garage. "Victoria, please," he begged. "I made a mistake. I know I did, but you're destroying my life. What about Amber? What about our baby?" I stopped and turned to face him. "What about them, Marcus? You're the one who built their future on stolen money and lies. You're the one who put them in this position. Don't blame me for exposing the truth. I'll lose everything." "Yes, you will. How can you be so cold?" I laughed, and it was not a kind sound. "Cold? Marcus, I'm not cold. I'm just done being warm to people who try to burn me. You wanted your freedom. You've got it. You're free from your job, free from your assets, free from the life you tried to steal from me. Congratulations. I'll fight this. I'll take you to court. Please do. I have 18 months of documentation. I have emails where you and Amber discussed your exit strategy. I have witnesses who saw you using company resources for personal matters. Take me to court, Marcus. Give me the opportunity to destroy you in public instead of just in a boardroom." He stared at me, and I saw the moment he realized he had nothing left to fight with. "I loved you," he said quietly. "No, you didn't. You loved what I could give you. My connections, my money, my status. You loved being Mr. Victoria Chen, the CEO's husband. But you never loved me, because if you had, you would have respected me enough to end our marriage honestly instead of stealing from me on your way out the door." I walked away and left him standing in that parking garage, probably for the last time. Over the next few months, I watched Marcus's life unravel with the same detachment I'd watch a particularly dramatic TV show. The DA filed charges. Marcus was arrested for embezzlement and fraud. His lawyer managed to get him a plea deal. 3 years in minimum security prison, full restitution to the company, and a permanent criminal record. Amber broke off the engagement. Apparently, being engaged to a felon wasn't quite the fairy tale she'd imagined. She had the baby, a boy she named Marcus Jr., which I thought showed a stunning lack of imagination. Marcus pays child support from his current job at a mid-level marketing firm, making a quarter of what he used to earn. The divorce settlement was voided, and we had to start over with negotiations. This time, I didn't sign anything without reading every word. I got the house, the cars, and my fair share of the marital assets. Marcus got nothing except legal bills and a felony record. Amber moved back in with her parents. Last I heard, she was working at a dental office and raising her son alone. Marcus sees the baby every other weekend, supervised visits, because of his criminal record. As for me, I'm still CEO of my company. My reputation, if anything, has improved. Turns out, people respect a woman who doesn't let anyone take advantage of her, even her own husband. I started dating again about 6 months after the divorce was finalized. Nothing serious, just dinners and conversations with men who treat me like an equal instead of a bank account with benefits. I sold the Westchester house. Too many memories, too many rooms Marcus had walked through. I bought a penthouse in Manhattan with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of Central Park. I decorated it exactly how I wanted, no compromises, no one else's opinion to consider. Rachel still thinks I went too far. "You destroyed him," she said over brunch one Sunday. "His career, his freedom, his future. Was it really necessary? I sipped my mimosa and considered the question. He tried to steal from me twice. Once from my heart, and once from my company. I could forgive the first. Relationships end. People fall out of love. But stealing from my company, using my resources to finance his betrayal? That crossed a line. But prison, Victoria. He's in prison. He committed a crime. He embezzled money. That's not my revenge. That's the legal system working exactly as it should. And you have no regrets. I thought about that envelope I'd handed Marcus at the baby shower. About his face when he realized what I'd done. About the moment his entire world collapsed. None, I said. Not a single one. Because here's what I learned through all of this. Dignity is important, but it's not the same as being a doormat. Grace is admirable, but it's not the same as letting people walk all over you. And forgiveness. Forgiveness is something you give when someone shows genuine remorse and works to make amends. Marcus showed neither. He tried to manipulate me, steal from me, and humiliate me. He counted on my professionalism and pride to protect him from consequences. He was wrong. A few weeks ago, I ran into Amber at a coffee shop. She was pushing a stroller, looking tired and worn in a way that had nothing to do with new motherhood and everything to do with discovering that her fairy tale had been a scam. She saw me and froze. For a moment, I thought she might run. But instead, she walked over. "Victoria," she said quietly, "can we talk?" I gestured to the empty seat across from me. She sat down, the baby sleeping peacefully in his stroller. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know that doesn't mean anything now, but I am. I was young and stupid, and I let Marcus convince me that what we were doing was okay. That you and he were basically over anyway. That I was special." "You were 28, I said, barely older than a college graduate. He was 40, with money and power and promises he never intended to keep. I'm not saying you're blameless. You made choices, but Marcus is the one who was married. Marcus is the one who owed me loyalty." Amber looked at her son. "He doesn't want to be a father." "Not really. He sends child support because the court makes him, but he never wanted this. Never wanted me. I was just someone young and impressed by him, and he used that." "Yes, he did." "How did you know?" she asked. "How did you know he was lying about everything?" "Because men like Marcus don't change. They just find new victims. He told you I didn't understand him, right? That I was too focused on my career. That I made him feel small." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "He told me the same things about his first girlfriend. How she didn't appreciate him. How she held him back. I thought I was different. I thought I could make him happy. Turns out, Marcus's problem was never the women in his life. It was Marcus. I lost everything," Amber said. "My job, my apartment, my reputation. Everyone knows what I did. Everyone knows I'm the mistress who wrecked a marriage." "Yes, they do. Don't you feel bad for me at all?" I looked at this young woman with her baby, struggling to put her life back together after being discarded by the same man who discarded me. "I feel sorry that you learned this lesson the hard way," I said. "I feel sorry that you're raising a child alone. But do I feel responsible for the consequences of your choices? No. You chose to sleep with a married man. You chose to get pregnant. You chose to build a future on someone else's marriage. Those were your decisions, Amber. Not mine." She nodded slowly. "I guess I deserve that. Probably." I stood up and gathered my things. "But for what it's worth, you're young. You have time to rebuild. Learn from this. Be better. And raise that boy to respect women, to tell the truth, and to understand that actions have consequences." I left her sitting there and walked out into the bright afternoon sun. And I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no pity. Just a calm, settled certainty that I'd done exactly what needed to be done. But that conversation with Amber wasn't the end of my story. It was barely the middle. 3 weeks after that coffee shop encounter, I received a phone call from Marcus's mother, Eleanor. We'd had a cordial relationship during the marriage, though she'd always been somewhat cold to me, probably because her precious son had married a woman who made more money than he did. "Victoria," she said, her voice tight, "we need to talk about Marcus. I have nothing to say about Marcus. He's in prison because of you. My son is a convicted felon because you couldn't let go of your grudge." I laughed, actually laughed. "Eleanor, your son is in prison because he embezzled over $200,000 from my company. I didn't put him there. His choices did. You could have handled it quietly. You could have fired him, gotten your money back, and let him move on with his life. But you had to destroy him publicly. You had to humiliate him. The same way he planned to humiliate me by proposing to his mistress at a baby shower? The same way he humiliated me by spending company money on another woman? Tell me, Eleanor, what exactly should I have done differently? There was a long silence on the other end of the line. He's my son, she finally said, and her voice cracked. Whatever he did, he's still my son. And now he's in prison, his career is over, and his child is growing up without a father. His child is growing up with exactly the father Marcus chose to be. Absent, unreliable, more concerned with his own comfort than his responsibilities. That's not my fault, Eleanor. That's Marcus's legacy. You're a cold woman, Victoria. I always knew it. All that success, all that money, it froze your heart. Marcus needed warmth, needed love, and you couldn't give it to him. Goodbye, Eleanor, I said and hung up. But her words stayed with me longer than I wanted to admit. Cold. Was I cold? Had my need for revenge turned me into something bitter and unfeeling? I called Rachel that night, poured myself a very large glass of wine, and asked her the question that had been haunting me. Am I a terrible person? Rachel was quiet for a long moment. Do you want the truth, or do you want me to make you feel better? The truth. Always the truth. You're not terrible, Rachel said slowly. But you're not the same person you were a year ago. The Victoria I knew before Marcus left would have been devastated. She would have cried for weeks, questioned what she did wrong, blamed herself. This new Victoria, she's harder, sharper, more ruthless. Is that bad? I don't know. Is it bad that you refused to be a victim? No. Is it bad that you made sure Marcus faced consequences? No. But Victoria, you didn't just make him face consequences. You obliterated him. You took everything. His job, his freedom, his future, his relationship with Amber. You left nothing standing. He deserved it. Maybe. Probably. But the satisfaction you got from it, the way you planned every detail of his destruction, that scares me a little. Because it means you're capable of that level of cold calculation. And once you know you're capable of it, once you've proven you can destroy someone completely, what's to stop you from doing it again? I sat with that question for a long time after we hung up. What was to stop me? The answer, I realized, was simple: nothing. And that was both terrifying and liberating. 2 months after the baby shower incident, the legal proceedings were still ongoing. Marcus's criminal trial had resulted in his conviction, but the civil suits were just beginning. The company was suing him for the embezzled funds plus damages. I was suing him for fraud in our divorce proceedings. Amber had filed for full custody with no visitation rights based on Marcus's criminal record and unreliability. Marcus had gone from successful executive to convicted felon to legally barred from seeing his own son in the span of 6 months. It was a spectacular fall from grace. But here's what nobody talks about when they talk about revenge. It's exhausting. Every court date, every deposition, every legal document that crossed my desk was a reminder of Marcus's betrayal. Every time I saw his name, I relived the moment he told me he wanted a divorce. Every time I had to recount the evidence of his affair, I felt the humiliation fresh. Revenge might have been satisfying in the moment I handed him that envelope, but the aftermath, the long, grinding process of legal battles and public scrutiny, that was draining me. My work started to suffer. Not dramatically, not in ways the board would notice, but I knew. I was distracted. I'd catch myself in meetings thinking about the next court date instead of the quarterly projections. I'd stay up late reviewing legal documents instead of strategic plans for the company. My assistant, Jennifer, finally said something about it. Victoria, you have 3 depositions scheduled this month. The legal team can handle most of this. You don't need to be personally involved in every aspect of the case against Marcus. I want to be involved. I want to see it through. At what cost? Jennifer asked quietly. You've lost 8 pounds in the last 2 months. You're not sleeping. You're missing social events you used to enjoy. This thing with Marcus, it's consuming you. It'll be over soon. Will it? Because from where I'm standing, you're letting him take up more space in your life now than he did when you were married. That hit hard, harder than I wanted to admit. That night, I sat in my penthouse apartment, looking out at the glittering lights of Manhattan, and I had to ask myself a difficult question. What did I actually want? I'd wanted Marcus to face consequences. Check. He was in prison. I'd wanted justice. Check. The courts had ruled in my favor. I'd wanted my money back. Check. The company had frozen his assets and would recover the embezzled funds. I'd wanted him to lose his credibility. Check. Everyone in our industry knew what he'd done. So why wasn't I satisfied? Why did I still feel this gnawing emptiness inside? Because revenge, I realized, doesn't actually heal you. It might feel good in the moment, but it doesn't undo the betrayal. It doesn't erase the pain. It doesn't give you back the years you lost or the trust that was broken. Revenge is just revenge. And once you've gotten it, you're left with the same emptiness you started with, plus the knowledge that you're capable of destroying another human being. I made a decision that night. I called Aunt Margaret the next morning. I want to settle, I told her. Settle? Victoria, we're winning. Marcus has nothing left to fight with. We can push for maximum damages. I don't want maximum damages. I want this to be over. Draw up a settlement agreement. Marcus pays back what he stole, we finalize the divorce, and I walk away. No more court dates, no more depositions, no more revenge. Are you sure? I'm exhausted, Margaret. I've spent the last 6 months consumed by rage and the need for justice, and I'm tired. I want my life back. We reached a settlement 3 weeks later. Marcus agreed to pay full restitution to the company over a 10-year period. The divorce was finalized with me keeping the house and the majority of our shared assets. In exchange, I agreed not to pursue further civil damages and to make no public statements about the case. The day I signed those papers, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: relief. It was over. Finally, completely over. I celebrated by doing something I hadn't done in years. I took a vacation. Not a working vacation, not a business trip disguised as time off, but an actual real vacation. I flew to the Amalfi Coast, rented a villa overlooking the sea, and spent 2 weeks doing absolutely nothing productive. I read trashy novels. I drank wine in the afternoon. I went for long walks along the beach. I ate pasta and didn't count calories. I slept until noon and stayed up watching the stars. And slowly, gradually, I started to feel like myself again. Not the person I had been before Marcus, not the cold, calculating version of myself I'd become during the revenge, but someone new. Someone who'd been through hell and survived. Someone who knew her worth and wouldn't accept less than she deserved. One evening, sitting on the terrace of my villa watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something made me answer. Victoria Chen? A woman's voice, professional but warm. Yes. My name is Dr. Sarah Morrison. I'm a clinical psychologist specializing in trauma recovery. I know this is unusual, but I was given your name by a mutual friend who thought you might be interested in speaking with me. About what? I'm writing a book about women who've experienced significant betrayal in their marriages and how they rebuilt their lives afterward. I've heard your story, and I think your perspective would be valuable. Would you be willing to speak with me? Not for therapy, just for research. Your identity would be completely confidential. I should have said no. I should have hung up and enjoyed my vacation and let my story stay private. But something made me say yes. Dr. Morrison flew to Italy the following week. We met at a cafe in Positano, and over espresso and lemon cake, I told her everything. The affair, the pregnancy, the baby shower, the envelope, the revenge, and the aftermath. She listened without judgment, taking occasional notes, asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me with kind eyes. Can I tell you what I hear when I listen to your story? She asked. Please. I hear a woman who was betrayed by the person she trusted most. A woman who was manipulated and taken advantage of. A woman who, instead of collapsing under the weight of that betrayal, stood up and fought back. You didn't just survive, Victoria. You refused to be a victim. But I destroyed him. Did you? Or did you simply reveal the truth of what he'd done and allow him to face the natural consequences of his actions? I planned it. I orchestrated every detail of his downfall. I could have handled it quietly, but I chose the most public, humiliating way possible. Why? I thought about that. Really thought about it. Because I wanted him to feel what I felt. When he told me he wanted a divorce, when I found out about Amber and the baby, I felt humiliated. Small. Worthless. Like I'd given him 15 years of my life, and I'd meant nothing. I wanted him to know how that felt. And did it work? Did destroying him make you feel better? In the moment, yes. Watching his face when he read that letter, seeing his perfect little world collapse, that felt amazing. But afterward, I shook my head. Afterward, I just felt empty. Dr. Morrison nodded. That's what I hear from most women I interview. Revenge feels satisfying in the moment, but it doesn't heal the wound. It doesn't give you back what was taken. At best, it's a distraction from the real work of healing. So, I wasted 6 months of my life on pointless revenge. I didn't say it was pointless. You ensured that Marcus faced consequences for his actions. You protected your assets and your company. You stood up for yourself in a way that many women don't feel empowered to do. That's not pointless, Victoria, but it's also not healing. Those are two different things. Then how do I heal? That's the harder question, isn't it? And it doesn't have a simple answer. But I can tell you what I've learned from interviewing hundreds of women who've been through what you've been through. Healing comes from understanding that his betrayal says nothing about your worth. Healing comes from building a life you love independent of him. Healing comes from forgiveness, not of him, but of yourself. Forgive myself? For what? For not seeing the signs earlier. For trusting him. For believing the marriage was solid. For spending 15 years with a man who didn't deserve you. Women carry so much guilt about these things, even though none of it was their fault. Her words hit me like a physical blow. Because she was right. Underneath all my anger at Marcus, underneath all my satisfaction at his downfall, I was furious at myself. For being blind. For being trusting. For giving him the power to hurt me. I started crying, right there in that Italian cafe. Not the angry, bitter tears I'd cried after Marcus left, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from a place I'd been avoiding for months. Dr. Morrison handed me tissues and waited patiently while I fell apart. I gave him everything. I said through my tears. I built his career. I supported his dreams. I loved him completely, and he threw it all away for a 28-year-old. What does that say about me? It says nothing about you. It says everything about him. Victoria, you were a good wife. You were loyal and supportive and loving. The fact that Marcus couldn't appreciate that, the fact that he chose to betray you, that's his failure. Not yours. Then why do I feel like I failed? Because we live in a world that tells women they're responsible for their husband's happiness. That if a man cheats, it must be because his wife wasn't enough, wasn't pretty enough, sexy enough, attentive enough. But that's a lie. Marcus cheated because he's a man who lacks integrity. Because he's selfish and entitled and willing to hurt the people who love him to get what he wants. That has nothing to do with you. I sat with those words, let them sink in, and something inside me shifted. 4 months, I've been focused on making Marcus pay. On proving that I wasn't someone who could be discarded without consequences. But underneath all that, I'd been trying to prove something to myself. That I was worthy. That I mattered. That I deserved better. But I didn't need to prove any of that. I'd always been worthy. Marcus's betrayal hadn't changed that. Over the next week, Dr. Morrison and I met several more times. She helped me process the trauma of the betrayal, the anger I'd been carrying, and the grief for the life I'd thought I was going to have. She also helped me understand something crucial. Revenge and healing aren't the same thing, but that doesn't mean revenge was wrong. Some people will tell you that forgiveness is the only path to healing, she said during our last meeting. That holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. But I think that's oversimplified. Sometimes anger is appropriate. Sometimes ensuring someone faces consequences is necessary, not just for you, but for everyone they might hurt in the future. So, you don't think what I did was wrong. I think what you did was human. Marcus committed fraud. He stole from your company. Those are crimes, Victoria. Reporting them wasn't revenge. It was justice. The fact that you timed the revelation for maximum impact at his baby shower, that was revenge. And honestly, I don't blame you. He tried to humiliate you by moving on so publicly, by flaunting his new relationship and his new baby. You simply returned the favor. But you said revenge doesn't heal. It doesn't. But sometimes it's a necessary step in the process. Sometimes you need to stand up for yourself, to prove to yourself that you won't be walked over before you can move on to actual healing. You needed to destroy Marcus not because destroying him would make you whole, but because allowing him to get away with it would have destroyed you. I understood then what I'd really been doing. I hadn't been trying to hurt Marcus, not really. I'd been trying to prove to myself that I had power, that I mattered, that I wouldn't be discarded like trash. And I had proven it. The question now was, what came next? When I returned to New York, I made some changes. Big ones. First, I hired a therapist of my own. Not Dr. Morrison, but someone local who specialized in betrayal trauma. Someone I could see weekly as I worked through the mess of emotions I'd been suppressing. Second, I restructured my role at the company. I promoted my VP to COO and delegated more of the day-to-day operations. I was still CEO, still ultimately in charge, but I gave myself permission to focus on strategy instead of minutiae. I gave myself permission to have a life outside of work. Third, I started saying yes to things I'd been avoiding. Dinner parties, art gallery openings, a book club, salsa dancing classes, things that had nothing to do with business or revenge or Marcus. Things I did just because I enjoyed them. And slowly, gradually, I started to build a life that felt like mine. 6 months after my trip to Italy, I met someone. His name was James. He was a professor of literature at Columbia, and he was absolutely nothing like Marcus. Where Marcus had been flashy and status-conscious, James was quietly intellectual. Where Marcus had needed constant validation, James was secure in himself. Where Marcus had been financially dependent on me, James had his own successful career and his own money. Our first date was coffee that turned into a 3-hour conversation about books and travel and the meaning of success. Our second date was a walk through Central Park where he told me about his divorce 5 years ago, how his ex-wife had cheated with one of his colleagues, how it had devastated him. "But you seem like you're past it," I said. "I am. It took years and therapy and a lot of work on myself. But I got there. And honestly, I'm grateful for it now, because it forced me to look at myself, to understand my own role in the relationship's failure, and to grow. I'm a better person now than I was then." "You think you had a role in her cheating?" "Not in the sense that I caused it. She made that choice. But I wasn't a great husband. I was absent, buried in my work, emotionally unavailable. I took her for granted. Her cheating was wrong, but the marriage had problems long before she made that choice. And I had to own my part in those problems. I appreciated his honesty, his willingness to take responsibility without excusing her behavior. On our fourth date, over dinner at a small Italian restaurant in the West Village, James asked me about my divorce. I told him. Not everything. Not the full revenge saga, but the basics. Marcus had cheated with a younger colleague, gotten her pregnant, asked for a divorce. I'd found out he was embezzling company funds and reported him. He was now in prison. James was quiet for a long moment. "That must have been devastating," he finally said. "It was. Are you over it?" I thought about that. Really thought about it. I'm not sure you ever completely get over that level of betrayal. But I'm past it. I'm building a new life. And I'm happy, genuinely happy, for the first time in years. What changed? I stopped trying to make Marcus pay and started trying to make myself whole. James reached across the table and took my hand. "I'd like to be part of that new life if you'll let me." And I realized I wanted that too. We took things slowly. After Marcus, I needed slow. I needed to build trust gradually, to prove to myself that not all men were liars and cheaters. James was patient with me, understanding when I needed space, supportive when I needed to talk about my fears. 4 months into our relationship, James met Rachel. "So, you're the new guy," Rachel said, giving him the protective best friend once over. "I am," James said easily. "And you're the best friend who helped Victoria survive her divorce." "I am. And I'm the person who will make your life hell if you hurt her." "Rachel," I protested, but James laughed. "I appreciate that. She deserves people in her corner." After dinner, Rachel pulled me aside. "He's good," she said. "Really good. Nothing like Marcus." "I know. Are you happy?" "I think I am." "You think?" It's been so long since I felt genuinely happy that I'm not entirely sure I remember what it feels like. But this, whatever this is with James, it feels right. It feels easy. And after everything with Marcus, easy is exactly what I need. Rachel hugged me tight. You deserve easy. You deserve good. I'm proud of you, you know, for putting yourself back together after Marcus tried to break you. He didn't break me. No, he didn't. He tried. He really tried. But you wouldn't let him. That's what I admire about you, Victoria. You refused to stay broken. A year after the divorce was finalized, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Marcus, written from prison. I stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. Part of me wanted to throw it away unread. But curiosity won. The letter was 3 pages long, handwritten, and surprisingly honest. Victoria, I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect you to care. But I'm writing it anyway, because my therapist says I need to take accountability for what I did, and I can't do that without acknowledging the person I hurt most. You were right about everything. I was selfish. I was entitled. I took you for granted. You gave me 15 years of your life, supported my career, loved me unconditionally, and I threw it all away because I was bored and flattered by the attention of a younger woman. I convinced myself that our marriage was the problem, that you were too successful, too independent, too focused on your career. But the truth is, I was intimidated by you. You were stronger than me, smarter than me, more successful than me. And instead of being proud of you, instead of supporting you the way you supported me, I resented you. Amber made me feel powerful. She looked up to me. She needed me. And my pathetic ego ate that up. I told myself I deserved to feel important, to feel needed. I told myself our affair was justified because you didn't appreciate me. But it was all lies. You did appreciate me. You loved me. And I destroyed that because I was too weak to deal with my own insecurities. I'm not writing this to ask for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I'm writing because you deserve to know that what happened wasn't your fault. You were an amazing wife. The failure was mine. I'm in prison because of my choices. My son is growing up without me because of my choices. My career is over because of my choices. And I have no one to blame but myself. I hope you're happy, Victoria. I genuinely do. You deserve all the happiness in the world. Marcus. I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and put it in a drawer. James found me an hour later, sitting on the balcony with a glass of wine. You okay? He asked. Marcus wrote me a letter from prison, apologizing. In a way, taking accountability, admitting he was wrong. How do you feel? I don't know. Part of me is glad he finally understands what he did. Part of me doesn't care. His apology doesn't change anything. It doesn't undo the betrayal. It doesn't give me back the 15 years I spent with him. Do you want to respond? I thought about that. Thought about writing back, about accepting his apology, about offering some kind of closure. No, I finally said. I don't need his apology. I don't need his acknowledgement. I've already moved on. He's part of my past, and I'd like to keep him there. Fair enough, James said, sitting down beside me and taking my hand. And I realized that was true. Marcus was my past. My painful, complicated, rage-filled past. But he wasn't my present. And he definitely wasn't my future. My present was this penthouse apartment I loved. It was my company that was thriving under my leadership. It was Rachel and our Sunday brunches. It was therapy sessions where I worked through my trauma. It was salsa dancing classes where I laughed until my sides hurt. It was James and the slow, steady building of a healthy relationship. My future was whatever I wanted it to be. And that was the most liberating realization of all. If you're still watching, if you're still listening, if you made it this far in my story, let me tell you what I learned through all of this. Revenge feels good in the moment. Standing up for yourself feels powerful. Making sure someone faces consequences for their actions feels like justice. And sometimes it is justice. But revenge doesn't heal you. It doesn't make you whole. It doesn't give you back what was taken from you. Healing comes from the harder work. The therapy, the self-reflection, the building of a new life, the learning to trust again, the forgiveness of yourself for being human, for trusting someone who didn't deserve it, for staying longer than you should have. Marcus tried to break me. He tried to discard me like I was nothing. And for a while, I let my need for revenge consume me. I became someone I didn't recognize, someone cold and calculating and focused on destruction. But I found my way back. Not to who I was before Marcus, but to someone better. Someone stronger. Someone who knows her worth and won't settle for less. And that, more than any revenge, more than watching Marcus go to prison, more than the satisfaction of destroying him at his baby shower, that is my victory. I'm 43 years old now. I'm in a healthy relationship with a man who respects me. I run a company I built from nothing. I have friends who love me. I have a life I genuinely enjoy. Marcus is in prison with 3 years left on his sentence. Amber is raising their son alone. Eleanor still blames me for her son's downfall. And I don't care. Their opinions, their judgments, their anger, none of it touches me anymore. Because I learned the most important lesson. Other people's betrayal says nothing about your worth. Their choices are about them, not you. And your healing doesn't require their acknowledgement, their apology, or their understanding. Your healing requires you, your commitment to yourself, your willingness to do the hard work of rebuilding. So yes, I handed my ex-husband an envelope at his baby shower that destroyed his life. And I don't regret it. But that's not what saved me. What saved me was deciding that I was worth saving, that I deserved happiness, that I wouldn't let Marcus's betrayal define the rest of my life. And if you're going through something similar, if your partner betrayed you, if your world fell apart, if you're trying to decide between revenge and healing, let me tell you this, you can have both. You can stand up for yourself and do the work to heal. You can ensure they face consequences and build a beautiful new life. But don't let the revenge consume you. Don't let the anger turn you into someone you're not. Use it as fuel to rebuild. Use it as motivation to create something better. And then let it go. Because at the end of the day, the best revenge isn't destroying them. It's building a life so amazing, so fulfilling, so genuinely happy that you forget they ever mattered. That's what I did. And that's what I hope you can do too. My name is Victoria Chen. I'm 43 years old. I'm a CEO, a girlfriend, a friend, and a woman who survived the worst betrayal of her life and came out stronger. When my husband left me for his pregnant mistress, I could have cried. I could have begged. I could have let him walk away with everything. Instead, I handed him an envelope at his baby shower that destroyed his career, his freedom, and his future. And then I built a life so beautiful that I barely remember his name. If this story gave you the satisfaction you needed today, check out the other videos on the screen. They're just as powerful. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, you are stronger than you think, smarter than they believe, and capable of so much more than just surviving. You can thrive, just like I did. See you in the next story.